Hello, and welcome to Travel Stories Unpacked, the travel podcast where we talk about all things from the silly to the serious and everywhere in between. I'm your host, Ashley Newton, and as always, thank you so much for spending some of your time with me. I really appreciate it. And this week, you guys, we have a very special return guest as we are unpacking London. That's right, London, baby. We're going across the pond. And I want to welcome back Melissa Rice, who joined us gosh, how long ago was that we had you on?
It was a few months ago. It was pretty early on in the podcast.
Yeah,
if I
it feels
right.
like just yesterday.
I feel like I had like winter boots on when I came in here. That's my point of reference for time frames.
Yes, well, Melissa joined us to talk about staying healthy while traveling, which was a ton of fun and super informative. So go check that episode out. Actually, there was two parts, so go check those out if you haven't seen it. But we are back today because you just returned from a trip to London.
Yes, and to clarify, London, England. There's a lot of Londons in the
world,
but that one is where we were.
No, I wanted to clarify with you before we sat down because I was like, if I'm asking all these questions and you're like, actually, I was just in like Southern Ohio or wherever because there are so many Londons. So
nothing against Southern Ohio. It's actually very beautiful and there's some awesome parks there. But this particular trip was London, England, across the pond.
And if you're listening from another London somewhere in the world, let us know because that would be so fun.
How many London listeners can we find?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Even if just one person commented, that would make my whole day. So Melissa, I have so many questions about this, but I just want to start with the first one, which is who were your travel companions? So as you're telling our story, we can sort of picture who you were traveling with.
Okay. So this was a family vacation with my husband and our two teenage boys.
Two teenage boys.
Two teenage boys, our sons that are 18 and 16 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the whole group. So why did you guys choose London for your family vacation?
Part of the reason for this particular trip, my oldest just graduated from high school. My youngest will graduate from high school next year.
Okay.
So it's kind of that idea of we don't know how many family vacations we have left, particularly, which sounds, I just realized, very dark and like,
no, hopefully for good reasons.
But no, I mean, I just know that life gets more and more complicated. Everyone's schedules get more complicated as you grow up, right? And so, they say you have 18 summers or whatever that is, but just kind of thinking, we've done lots of little car trips in the last couple of years, shorter trips. We haven't done a big family trip, and we don't know, it's kind of it could be one of the last times that it was easy for all of us to go at the same time. So we started planning the trip with that in mind.
But it wasn't the first time that you all left the country as a family, right?
No. So the very first trip we took out of the country was to Costa Rica in 2014. We went for a month and we were experimenting with living outside the country at that time. So our kids were 8 and 6.
Okay.
Back then. And then we actually ended up moving. We did live in Ecuador in South America for a few years. So, and we did lots of traveling within that country of Ecuador. And they've done a couple of other little, like one short cruise, one short all-inclusive vacation.
So it wasn't a shocking experience for your kids to leave the country for the first time. They had some experience with that.
We haven't done that for a while. And also this was their first time going anywhere in Europe.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So it was very different in that sense.
Yeah.
Of destination wise and even the travel time and traveling like across that many time zones. And so there were some different things to kind of take into account as we were planning.
So how did you guys land on London then?
So it became one of our goals of this particular trip was to really try to do a lot of the planning together. So typically I am the travel planner in the family. My husband is happy to just stay at home most of the time or do little day trips. He'll go along, but he would never be the one like, I think we should travel somewhere, right? And then as mom and the person who likes to plan travel, I was generally the one picking a destination and deciding on activities, and everybody follows me and then generally have a good time. But this was very much meant to be more of a collaborative effort as a family. And also, I feel like our job as parents is to teach life skills to our children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And travel planning and traveling how to travel, I feel like is an important life skill.
Honestly, I don't want to derail the convo, but like that really is. I am shocked at the amount of people that have no idea how to book their own flights or like look up hotel rates or even like the considerations that come in with traveling to a new country that you just sort of pick up or you research. Like the amount of people I know who just like send their money to whoever books the trip via Venmo or whatever, and that's all they do. It's like, wow, that's shocking to me. So I love that you're teaching your kids to think about travel from the beginning to end sort of approach and not just like, oh, it'll all come together.
Exactly. And like, and not to take it for granted, if someone is doing the planning and you are the sender of the money to Venmo, like at least appreciate the effort that goes into it.
So
and try to be
true. So
cooperative.
true. Yeah.
But also like, we wanted them to be invested in the trip and feel like it was something they could look forward to, not just maybe a destination that I picked out.
Yeah.
And then we talked a lot about even budgeting and time spent traveling to different places, money spent in different ways, because I think those are all part of the travel planning experience. Some of it stemmed back to my own childhood, traveling as a family. I have certain family members, a particular older brother of mine that, and I shouldn't say it. He may listen to this someday. I should be careful.
Hey, I've bashed my family on this podcast and they still accept me.
Even though we traveled a lot when I was younger, our family vacations were typically the same. We went skiing somewhere in the winter, whether it was even just like 2 days in Pennsylvania or somewhere bigger. We went to the beach in North Carolina in the summer, and we went to Florida to visit my grandparents in the winter. And we did various.
You're describing just like Midwest vacation to a T. Yes.
But part of that was because my older brother in particular was never a museum or a city or like he wanted to go, he had to be doing something all the time.
Okay.
And some people are not good at supporting what other people want to do, even if it's not their first choice.
Yeah.
And it became easier. And I think, we enjoyed those other kinds of trips, but it always felt kind of limiting too. Once my
catering a bit
to that, and plus we were a family. We were a family of 5 because I have an older brother and a younger brother. There's some things that are easier as a family of 4. You fit better into different vehicles and hotel rooms restaurant tables and amusement park rides. So my brother is 4 years older than me, and he had gotten married and left home, and we started doing family vacations as a family of 4. And suddenly it was like literally a whole new world of destinations opened up.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah.
We did a New England road trip and we went to Europe. That was my first time going to Europe when I was like 19-ish, give or take.
Oh, okay.
And we went and did and saw things that we just hadn't done for whatever reason. I know what my reasons are, like when my older brother was there. So anyway, wrapping that up, one of the things I wanted my kids to appreciate is that it doesn't always have to be about what your first choice is all the time for the whole vacation. Like, here's how you travel as a group and how you do things that are appealing to one person one day, another person another day, or, and you can still enjoy it and don't be miserable even if it's not what your first choice of activity
Are you willing to teach this to adults? Because some people still need to learn.
I'm not saying it's always easy because I struggle with that myself, right? Yeah. But anyway, so we're really just trying to make it a collaborative effort. And we started comparing different types of vacations, whether it was driving out west in the United States, whether it was something like an all-inclusive resort and just, kind of fun in the sun. And one thing that we just kept coming back to was London. My older son does have a friend there that he met several years ago in the United States. They've kept in touch. And so he said, I think it'd be really cool if we could go and visit him. He lives on the outskirts of London. And then we started looking at things to do in London. And it was kind of like there were so many options there that we each had different things that were appealing to us.
Okay, so back to your whole
to now there's something for everyone there. And then we started looking at, you have to look at the logistics, the budget, airfare options, how long, we could travel, and things just kind of fell into place from there. But that was the very long explanation of how we decided to go to London.
No, I really love that. And like, I can tell you as a kid, I would have been so excited to have like my voice heard and my opinion like taken into account when planning something like that. So I just think that is awesome. But also knowing you and knowing your history in travel and like always having the planning just fall on you. What was it like opening that up? Was it hard to relinquish some of the control, or was it you were just so excited to like impart the knowledge, or was it a little bit of both?
It was definitely a little bit of both. And another travel skill is like the packing thing, right? And I am very much a try to be a careful packer, really think things through. And I've always kind of done that for my kids.
Yeah.
But I can't keep doing that for them,
no,
right?
especially you said 18 and 16.
18 and 16, they should be able to function as adults or close to it and with less and less direct supervision, but it's hard to let that go.
Yeah.
And then even with planning, like the travel logistics and things, and I know how I would research or what kinds of things I would look at about a place or an activity, and they don't necessarily do it the same way. And so I had to decide, when do I step in and say something or take over a little bit, or when do I just say, I don't know if that's going to work, but that's not my afternoon to plan. So, okay.
Interesting.
And, you know, it was a learning experience for all of us, because they did learn along the way some of the things I had maybe suggested that they do or asked that they do that didn't get done, then turned into like, oh, now we know why you said this would be a good idea to figure out ahead of time. So I don't know how much you want to get into trip details. Like, I can think of an example.
Please give an example. That's great.
So one of the things, my younger son is very interested in architecture and design. And he had found like a walking tour to see some of the main skyscrapers, buildings, landmarks of London. And he found like a PDF version of a brochure. And I had said, like, well, we have a Google Maps list where we were saving locations or highlights so that we could, everybody could throw Google that. Maps. So we had one for sightseeing and one for food ideas, like restaurants and things. And at some point I had said to him, you know, you could make a Google Maps list with those buildings on it, or at least the ones that you know you want to see, so that when we're out and about, we can easily navigate, you know. Somehow that didn't get done, or he didn't understand what I meant by it. And now it's our first day in London, our first full day. And that was what we had planned to do, was start with this walking tour, because we thought, great, we'll get a feel for the lay of the land, and you'll get to see your buildings. And he's got like the PDF version of this brochure on his cell phone, and I've got Google Maps separately, and I need everything to be all in one place to be able to be the navigator.
Right.
And we're walking the wrong way, and we're doing it. It was just like,
yeah, the PDF isn't like responding to you.
Exactly. So, and it's much easier even to see where things are. Anyway, so after probably half an hour of wandering and realizing we're going to be here all day and possibly until tomorrow trying to find these buildings.
Right.
Like, hey, how about if we find a nice place to sit down? Because I can sense like the frustration from the whole family building.
Yeah.
At this point, let's sit down and find a nice place to sit, take a break. And I have data on my cell phone, because that's the other thing technologically. I got a data package cell phone, like for my phone. My older son did, but the other two in the family didn't, because we really didn't all need to pay for that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's expensive, and they're not really going to anyway. Like, it's fine. I have data. We'll sit down. And we sat there in the middle of London and made a little Google Maps list, like I had mentioned before.
Right.
But then I got oh, you're right, Mom. Like that. Now I see
letting
what you
them
meant.
live the experience and come to that conclusion on their own, I think, is brave and like
and in
hard
the grand
to do.
Scheme of things, it cost us half an hour of wandering around the city before we figured out, okay, we really need to do this.
So that's definitely,
it's just one of those times, you know, like, okay, I did let go a little bit. We all learned a lesson. We don't need to keep learning this lesson for the next 6 hours.
Right. I feel like that is traveling like a mom, though, because you're thinking like holistically about like how this is going to impact your kids, not only on the trip, but like throughout their lives. Whereas like if it was me planning with a group of adults, I would just be so frustrated, because I'd just be like, why didn't you do this? We told you needed to do it. Yeah. So it's just like really interesting to hear that perspective and how you took it to every detail of the trip planning to like really make sure that it was collaborative, like you said.
We had a few things that it was like, well, and some things you just can't anticipate too. But a few things like, well, this could have been planned a little better, or if this, but you just kind of have to not sweat the small stuff and
for sure
move forward. And we really didn't have any like major disasters with the packing. One child did somehow ignore all the reminders to pack a rain jacket.
Oh, for London?
For London. Because why would you need a raincoat?
Yeah.
But, no, poor kid. I mean, he realized it, and he's like, it's okay. He had like a lightweight zip, like sweatshirt hoodie thing. And he is not of the two kids, he's the one who doesn't really get cold or doesn't. And thankfully it didn't really rain that much. There's probably only one time he really could have used it. And I was like, okay, you learned a lesson. I said, if you get cold and wet enough, you're just gonna have to buy yourself a rain jacket.
I
That's
think
gonna
it's
be your
different
London
too,
souvenir.
like when you're a kid. Like I would never take any of that, oh, you need a jacket to, like, I'm not cold. Like you really just like brave the elements differently until you reach a certain age. And then
you're like, I'm too old to
right,
get
if I'm wet for
pneumonia.
5 minutes, I cannot stand it. So I will absolutely have all the rain gear possible. But since you brought up packing, I have to share this story. We were at least 16, but between the ages of like 16 and 18, and I'm going on this beach vacation, and we had gone with the same like group for years, you know, but I guess this was the first year that his mom let him pack his own suitcase to come with us. And again, we're talking about anywhere between the ages of like 16 and 18. And we were going to the beach. Any guesses what he didn't pack in his suitcase?
A bathing suit.
A bathing suit.
Aye.
What is that? So then like the very first day we had to go to one of those shops and he had to pick one up, and we never let him live it down. I mean, obviously I'm talking about it today on this podcast. So like, yes, teaching your kids how to pack and letting them make those mistakes is important.
There was another trip recently where one forgot to pack underwear.
Oh my God.
I mean, when you think of just basics to pack for any trip. But the good thing is, as long as you're going somewhere where there's a Walmart or some other similar store, you can figure it out.
I don't want to spend my time that way.
The rain jacket I get if you're not looking at your list and you think about it and you kind of forget about it, you never go back to it. But I'm thinking like, isn't underwear like the first thing you put in your suitcase?
So let's say if you were going somewhere for 5 nights, how much underwear do you bring?
Too much. I don't know what it is. It's like a security blanket to have a few extra pairs of underwear.
For sure. I'm the same way.
Sure.
Like I would never bring just 5 for a 5 night, not even 6. Like I'm talking 10. Like we are bringing every pair of underwear.
I don't know what I'm expecting to happen, but that's one thing I don't want to have to go shopping for.
I also don't want to do laundry. I know some people are very comfortable doing that, and like I don't know, I just don't want to.
Usually like we tend to be team Airbnb, especially traveling as a family. And one thing I will look for is a place, especially for a longer trip, that has a washer dryer, because it saves packing, and when you're paying usually now for checked luggage or so I don't mind doing some laundry if I need to during the trip.
So how long was this trip?
We were gone from start to finish. I believe it was 10 days.
Oh, lovely. What a great chunk of time.
And, you know, with traveling that far, it's pretty much a full day of travel as part of that. So I think it was 8 nights altogether that we were there.
So what was your accommodation set up for when you were in London?
So we stayed the first 5 nights in an Airbnb apartment, kind of in London, fairly centrally located, but still not right in the middle of what I would call the most like touristy areas or city, but within we stayed at one that was right by both a train station and a bus stop.
Oh, nice.
So we could pretty easily get in and out of the city and get to different areas.
So I don't have a ton of Airbnb experience, but I've stayed in enough to be able to tell this is a rental property. Like that is the sole purpose, is for this person to rent it out. And then I've stayed in others where it's kind of clear, oh no, we live here part-time, or like I'm just renting it out this week. Did you get a sense of what your Airbnb was?
We did. I have to say I am like an obsessive Airbnb researcher before I actually book one.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the pictures and I'm reading the reviews of previous guests.
This is tying into another episode. Reviews, people, leave them.
And I always say you have to take every review with a grain of salt because you don't know what that person's like point of reference is.
Totally.
But when you see like an overall theme, pointing it out, and sometimes you can tell even by looking at the availability calendar, like how wide open is it, or are they just Airbnb-ing their apartment while they're gone for a month, doing, you know, like that's their home kind of thing. So I tend to be pretty picky. I won't book properties that are like brand new, or that don't have a lot of reviews, or don't have a lot of feedback, or don't have a lot of pictures, detailed pictures.
That's and you have so sketchy.
You have to explain the bedding situation to me too. Like, and especially, although we're a family of 4, 2 kids, my kids are the size of grown men now.
Correct. Yeah.
So a little fold out cot is not going to work for them to share as like the sofa bed, right? So anyway, details like that. But that worked really well. So that was the first 5 nights. And then we actually ended up staying for 3 nights with the friends of ours that we know. When they found out we were coming, And it turned out that their daughter was going to be out of town. She was actually visiting friends in Australia for a month or something. So they had, like, we have an extra bedroom right now if you guys don't mind squeezing in here. So they live still in London, but more kind of what I would call like suburbs.
Okay.
City suburbs, like not super far out, but they had invited us to come and stay with them for 3 nights. So that was a lot of fun too, because that became kind of like, we did our city touristy things, and then we got a little bit more of like real London or real life in London. And we got to meet some of their friends and hang out with them and go to some of the more local. We just went to the park, and it just a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And even some of the culture there, like we had such a good time. I guess I didn't realize how different like British culture is.
And on that note, I have some questions about your
Sure.
Airbnb. Okay,
So yeah,
these are things that I've like just sort of heard through the realm, because I went to London, but we stayed in hotels, and honestly, I was just like, that was my first time traveling like to Europe or anything on that scale. So I was just like taking it all in, super overwhelmed, super in love with everything immediately. But now these are questions that like I want to know if you picked up on any of this. So
okay.
did your Airbnb in London have a washer and dryer for your clothes?
It had a combination washer and dryer.
Amazing.
Have you seen those?
No, but was it in the kitchen?
This time it was not, but I am very familiar with that concept of it being in the kitchen. This was actually in like a little hall closet.
Okay.
So
how did it, like, did you use it? Did it work well?
Used it. It was easier this time. The last time I used one was when we were in Ecuador, and everything was in Spanish and there was no instruction manual.
Okay.
And although I do speak some Spanish, the concept, I've never really used like that combination washer and dryer, and I didn't really understand how it was working. So this time was slightly easier. And one thing that I do appreciate is a host who leaves like the manuals for things all in a drawer.
Absolutely.
So that was there. I guess part of the concept is that you don't necessarily use it to completely dry your clothes. Like when we use a dryer here in the States, most of the time we want the clothes to be dry when we pull them out. It's more of like getting most of the moisture out.
And then they hang dry. So was there a spot that you could do that?
They provided a drying rack inside the apartment. And so there was not an outside space because we were in kind of like a maybe 7 or 8 floor building.
I love this about British people, at least the ones I've seen on TikTok, is they don't call it like a backyard or like anything. They always call it a garden.
Yes, it's
like
a garden.
In the garden.
Yeah.
I just think that's so whimsical.
It doesn't matter if they're flowers or not. It's the garden.
Right. Like we think of gardens in the US as, like you said, flowers, or landscaping.
Vegetables.
Yeah. Like it's like very intentional. Not like you would never just call a space a garden. A garden is something you build, something you create. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's certainly something, and it's actually something we as a family just traveling kind of take into account when we're talking about what fabrics or like what clothes to bring.
For sure, absolutely.
Jeans are heavy and take a long time to dry. You know, lighter fabrics that don't take up as much room you can layer, but that dry faster. So even if you have to like hand wash something in the sink, that is not going to take forever to dry.
Yeah.
So we did get the washer dryer figured. I used it a few times, and it was good to be able to, you know, not have to pack as much because we were trying to travel pretty lightly.
And then another question for the Airbnb in London, did it have air conditioning?
So it did.
So isn't that like, that's not very common,
it's
right?
It's not common. It was a newer building. And actually not long after we left, they had a heat wave in London.
Yes.
Unusually hot for them temperatures. And if you look at the temperature, you might think, oh, that's not that hot. But their buildings are not made for that. They don't have the same infrastructure. Usually they're fighting cold dampness, and their buildings are meant to like keep heat in. And so, but when we were looking and knowing the time of year we were going to be traveling, that was something that we did look at, was whether there was air conditioning or not. And it was a newer building. It had air available. It was pretty, the weather was actually pretty comfortable while we were there.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
think I might have turned the air on. I don't know if I turned it on or not. We had windows that could also open, and they have these, one thing with European windows is you can like open them wide, or you can just tilt them open for ventilation. You can look on social media, TikTok, whatever. There's all these explanations of like, because at first it feels like you broke the window. Like, and one of my kids actually did that when we got there. He's like, no. He had turned the handle and it tips in, but it feels like the whole door is gonna fall on you.
Yeah.
So actually it was pretty, and we were on a higher floor, so we had a breeze. So we were good. But if you were traveling anytime between like May and August, that is, if you're somebody who's used to having air conditioning, or like I would totally
Right.
think about that, whether it's hotels
True.
or Airbnbs.
Well, and I know, like, for instance, like, I have some chronic health conditions. So, like, for
Mhm.
me, like, monitoring and, like, maintaining a body
Mhm.
temperature is, like, really important. So,
Mhm.
just those sorts of things. Like, maybe you have seen what I've seen and you thought AC just didn't exist anywhere in London.
Mhm.
Like, that's not the case. You can find it, but you do have to do your research
Yep.
and see what's
And it's
up.
especially in older buildings, it's not going to
Yeah.
be common at all.
So you had mentioned that you went to Europe with your family when you were younger. So
Mhm.
had you been to London before?
I was there one time shortly before I got married. I worked for an airline at the time, and we used to do silly things like, hey, I have 2 days off. The flights to London are wide open. Hey, mom, you want to go to London for a night? And we went for 2 days or something. And
What a life.
back when I
It sounds
was,
so
I know,
glamorous.
and I mean, you know, it didn't cost much, and we found a cheap hotel to stay in, and it was just like our last little girls trip before I
Oh.
got married. But it was really only 2 days.
Yeah.
We saw like just a couple of highlights. We went shopping a little bit, and we flew home again. So, and that was more than 20 years ago.
Okay.
So it really,
So you would say this is your first time truly visiting.
it really was my first time like exploring London, and so much of the city has changed
Yeah.
in that time period too, that I'm not someone who normally likes to go back to the same destination, but
Right.
I was not sad to go back again, because I knew there was so much more of the city that I still wanted to see, and plus like taking the kids and
Yeah.
my husband, you know, who hadn't been to the city either.
So I think we need to get into all of that maybe in a part 2, like what you guys did, what you ate, where you explored, because now we've like laid the foundation. I understand how you got everybody on board, and really I loved hearing about your planning process, and hope that people will be able to take some inspiration from that when they're planning their next family trip.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share, and I'd love to share some more of the details of our actual like London experience.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So you want to stick
next
around
time,
and we'll do
sure,
part 2?
Part 2.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to stick around and we're going to keep talking. And next, we're going to, like I said, dive into more of what you guys got to experience on your trip. So stick around for part 2, which will air next week. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and spending time with us. And thank you, Melissa, for sharing your stories. And I just want to hear from all of you as well. So please drop your comments below or share your stories with us anywhere on social media using our hashtag #TravelStoriesUnpacked. This podcast is brought to you by KHM Travel Group, a leading host agency for independent travel agents. Go to khmtravel.com to learn more.